has exceeded expectations, growing by 1.3% in 2017. The latest data by Statistics South Africa further shows that gross domestic product accelerated 3.1% in the last quarter of the past year.
The last few years were tough for the South African economy as it was recovering from a debilitating drought and experiencing sluggish growth. After a wobbly start to 2017, the economy moved from 0% growth to 0.7%. Market watchers were still waiting for fourth quarter growth to paint the picture for last year as a whole, and the figure surprised many.
It was a lot stronger than the market expected. We were projecting about 1.5%. And I think in the context of the improvement in sentiment that we've had since the start of the year, certainly a very welcome figure. And if you look at in terms of where the growth actually comes from, it was fairly broad-based. There were some sectors that sort of stood out, agriculture certainly one of those.
During his budget speech last month, former Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba announced a GDP growth of 1% for 2017, up from 0.7% in October, but the economy grew by 1.3%. Stats SA says mining growth was spurred on in part by an increase in production. Agriculture had a bumper maize crop and recorded growth of nearly 18% in 2017. Animal products recorded an even bigger rise in production in the last quarter of last year compared to the third quarter, although there's concern that the debate around land expropriation could affect future growth.
Agriculture is just about 2% of total GDP. The land question is a key one, and I think it will be important to address it and address it fairly quickly in order to clear out any uncertainty regarding what South Africa's land policy should be. But I don't expect that in 2018 specifically this big debate around land is going to have a huge impact on agricultural activity, because as you know, for summer crops specifically, the plantings have already been done, and we're just waiting to get a sense of what the harvest is going to look like.
Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene says National Treasury is likely to raise its growth forecast upwards for this year and next year during the medium-term budget policy statement in October. This is a result of improved business and investor confidence. After meeting rating agency Moody's yesterday, he was upbeat that South Africa had done enough to stave off another credit rating downgrade. Colin Limawane, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Economist Owen Nkomo is joining us via Skype for us to look into the good news of better than forecast GDP growth. Owen, thank you so much for joining us. Now, 1.3% GDP growth beating Treasury forecasts. Was this expected?
Look, we had been looking for a number of 1% and some market commentators were looking for 0.9%, Lulu. And I think the 1.3% is a very significant beat, and it's a welcome beat, actually. And I do believe that if the economy continues to grow at this stage, or rather at this rate, we will have a very decent 2018, in my view.
Is the trend continuing?
Look, the trend can continue, because I can say that since we had sort of the technical recession early in 2017, the rest of the quarters have continued to record positive growth. We escaped a technical recession, and indeed, in this last reading of the GDPs, we have seen a revision, an upward revision in the GDP numbers for that quarter that led us to a technical recession. So I do definitely believe that this trend can continue going forward, as long as we can stick with policy implementation and we don't, stop the rand from rallying, and all the other things that the government needs to implement are done. We fight corruption, and we save wasteful expenditure, and we control government expenditure. I think this GDP will continue to be better.
Owen, according to Stats SA, production and farming rose by 17.7%, even with the parched resources in the Western Cape. How is any negative farming figures that may come of the Western Cape likely to affect us going forward?
Look, I think it's a very big concern. We have to monitor the production numbers from the Western Cape, especially because, as you know, there's a very big drought there. It's a big weather change that's causing the limited rain to fall in Cape Town. I do think that the country has got other regions where we can subsidize that production that could have come from Western Cape. Obviously, the big challenge for the country will be exports coming through the wine farms, which, in my view, are going to continue to be depressed.
Does the current political situation in the country have anything to do with the success that we're seeing?
Look, it's still early days, but let's remain positive that the current political positive environment, the current positive economic environment will persist. And we need confidence to come through for people to come back and invest in South Africa.
Oh, and you mentioned earlier the fact that as long as policy doesn't change and there's continued regulation of, what is supposed to happen with regards to the country and the economy, can the ongoing trend just to survive the policy upheavals, looking at the issue of land expropriation without compensation, do you think this may have an effect on the economy going forward?
I don't think at this stage, because the government has indicated that they don't want to do any land expropriation that will negatively impact on agriculture and definitely on the production of the country. I think the government will be very careful to be too aggressive in taking land that is currently productive, but at the same time, the land discussion is still up for debate, and I think healthy debate around the land issue is important. Land has to be taken back to its rightful owners, but not at all costs, definitely. Otherwise, we will see some farmers got to pull out of the farming space and maybe consider going elsewhere to produce stuff for their businesses. But I do think that the government will use a measured pace in terms of dealing with this land redistribution or land expropriation. But I believe that the economy, in my humble view, for the next sort of 5 odd years, is going to run without any major ramifications coming through from this land appropriation, because we are really still at an early stage of determining what form this land expropriation is going to take, how the government is going to deal with the land, the case of productive agricultural land, relative to just broad-based redistribution or appropriation of land.
Now, the rand strengthened by 0.25 on the back of the news. Can it sustain this trend?
I certainly think so, but the risk that now has come to the fore is the fact that the rand has strengthened, but if interest rates come down, which we expect that interest rates in the country will fall by 50 basis points, if that happens, that may weaken the currency a bit. However, I think the broader South African economic backdrop is one that favors a strong currency. GDP continues to grow, people will bring money to the country, that means they'll have to buy the rand and sell some foreign currencies as they buy the rand. So for that reason, I do see the rand, in my humble view, closing at 11.50 to the US dollar by the end of the year, if not stronger than that.
One of the more pressing issues in the country currently is the issue of unemployment. Does this dent this problem in any way? What is likely to happen going forward, or what needs to happen going forward with regards to the unemployment situation that we're dealing with?
So if the economy improves, I've always maintained that if the economy improves, entrepreneurs will take on more risk. They'll start more projects, they'll start more businesses, they'll sell more stuff outside the country. They need more producers, people to work in the factories. They need more people to go and work with the land. They need more service providers. I do think that is definitely positive for unemployment. And as you saw, the last reading on unemployment fell by 1%. And I think that if we continue with this game plan the country has at the moment, if we do implement it, we could see unemployment, in my view, continue to fall further with more people getting jobs.
Now, very quickly in wrapping up, Owen, we have run out of time. Moody's Ratings Agency is reviewing our status. This is on the 23rd of March. Have we dodged a downgrade bullet?
I definitely think so. I definitely think we've dodged another downgrade bullet here. The numbers so far convincing, production numbers, mining production, all positive, farming production, great. We've got good rains except for Cape Town. So I do think we will avoid being downgraded.
Owen, thank you so much for joining us. We'll leave it there for now. That was Economist Owen Nkomo on Inkunzi Wealth, weighing in on the good news on the country's GDP growth.